Did your analysis dig into anything regarding the modal preferences of the millennials? What we're seeing in New York is what appears to be a strong preference for rail over bus given the alternative. Some of that may be just a matter of the more modern technology that our rail cars have, but I'd be interested in knowing whether there's any data that sees that as a national tendency.
I think some of the data came back and said that rail is oftentimes something that people prefer. However, as with all polls, we also found that they like a variety of different options, so bus is also popular. So yes, rail has attributes that are highly popular, but people also like the connections that buses can make, so oftentimes rail products cannot provide. So it's actually a mixed bag. But one way to think of this group is they are probably a new variant of the choice rider, and I don't particularly like that term, but that's what we've been calling it historically. It's a new variant of the choice rider, and they have similar sort of needs as one might find with that.
How did your study try to determine whether the trends you were seeing were the trends of millennials or whether they were just general trends? It looks like you only talked to people 34 and younger, so how can we tell whether what you're seeing, this behavior, is actually isolated to them or whether it's a general trend at large?
I think this study primarily focused on millennials. I've seen other research which I can forward you afterwards if you shoot me an email, that is sort of given an indication that you see an increased attraction to public transportation across all generations. However, this generation happens to be the one that has shown the most strong preference compared to other generations. So yes, this trend is occurring across the board, but this generation is particularly significant when it comes to this attraction compared to other generations.
A few people wanted to know how the market areas were selected for the first phase of the study.
The first phase, the market segments were considered primarily in a way to try to capture where millennials currently are. So we focused on areas that we know have particular attraction to millennials to try to figure out if there's something about those general metropolitan areas that make them somehow attractive. So that was the first phase. The second phase is probably a little bit more of a wide survey. We added some additional cities, but the primary thing here is to understand, in particular, places that are attracting millennials. What is this meaning for their service, and what is this meaning for continue to have them as transit users as they grow older?
Another question about methodology. What was the sample size used in the study?
The sample size in phase 2 was 1,000, and that was conducted nationally. So 1,000 from a nationwide survey.
Have you collected data on the characteristics of the hotspot neighborhoods and the characteristics of the transit systems for each of the respondents? And if so, did you weight the data when you made the tables, and did you do a multivariate analysis?
We did not do any multivariable econometrics here. The 1/3 sample is of millennial hotspots. Those were zip codes in the metropolitan areas of the cities that we chose that are particularly attractive to millennials. However, the survey was conducted metropolitan-wide, so we also had a large number of suburbanites. So kind of a mix when it comes to the overall numbers for each community. The hotspots we've noticed had just simply stronger numbers when it comes to transit usage, stronger numbers when it comes to that attraction. However, when it comes to the size of that particular market, they're only 1/3 of the overall survey, and oftentimes we're a relatively small part of each metropolitan area. So the numbers we have are metropolitan-wide. So it's fair to say that the preferences that we noted exist also for suburban millennials as well as urban millennials.
I've got a question about the methodology. I don't see how the 1,000 participants were stratified or randomly selected. Did you go out of your way to make sure you included the urban poor, African Americans, for instance, who live in poor neighborhoods, who don't graduate high school, let alone accumulate debt for college? Or is this primarily a voluntary online survey that was administered?
Let's see. So in terms of ethnicity, we're looking at 59% being Caucasian, 20% were Asian, 11% African American, 9% Hispanic, and 2% were rated as others. It was essentially a random selection of people who self-selected into the online survey within the metropolitan areas that we picked. Just it also happened to be a randomly selected group when it comes to who decided to participate in the survey. So we didn't actually get to pick the zip codes per se about like where we wanted to focus. We just knew what zip codes we had respondents from and could rate whether or not those were some of the more attractive zip codes for millennials based on the data.
Now, how were they solicited?
The research outfit actually solicited them via online survey methodology. So they have a stable of folks they've been able to work with for a variety of projects and made them particularly useful for being hired to do this research. So in a lot of cases, we already had people who we could call on to reach out via the online survey. But as I said, it's not, I wouldn't say a randomly selected group that we were able to get in each community.
Okay, so it appears to me that really, I mean, it's a great piece of study, but you're really talking about middle-class America, millennials.
But I think given the sample that I just mentioned is probably, let's see, so I'll give you some of the other numbers on education and income. So 39% have some college or less, 44% completed college, and 17% were postgraduate. 39% made probably less than $50,000. 24% earned between $50,000 and $75,000, and 37% earned over $75,000. The mean income, mean household income, was $69,715. I think in the various cities we have here listed, it's roughly about the same. A little lower in some cities such as Portland, Seattle, but a little higher in others. So I think it's fair to say it might be skewed somewhat to the more educated group here, since we are talking about 44% having completed college, which I think is probably a little higher than the national average.
Do you have any examples of apps that fully integrate or do a great job of integrating local discoveries and transit planning?
I myself have been looking for these just my own personal life. I would say right now it probably takes me more than one app to be able to do that. And I think this is an area of importance that I would even suggest people do their own local. I know some of our members have done local contests to get the best app and to encourage folks to submit apps for usage. This would be an area where I would suggest, based on the research, it might be useful to kind of see what the market can provide by doing a contest to see if we can get some better apps that integrate all of those various components. It's something that the market clearly wants. It's something that could be a major plus for our industry and for people's connection to public transportation. However, the current availability of them needs to be worked on, I think.
Did you look at whether the age of children influences millennials' transportation choices? In other words, did parents with infants make different choices than those with school-age children?
We did not differentiate based on the age of the children. However, given the age of the parents in this sample, it's probably a fair guess that they're not too much older as offspring. So to answer that, no, we don't have that as part of this survey. However, I would surmise that most of them might be on a slightly younger end.
Is the trend similar in smaller urban or rural areas?
The trend is similar in suburban areas. We did not have a rural sample in this survey. It's primarily focused on the metropolitan areas. What I can tell you from mapping out all the locations that we have here, which we actually did, we found that it's widely distributed across the metropolitan area. We have a large subset of people who responded from pretty much all the suburbs around the country. So we could say this is both an urban and suburban phenomenon, and a lot of the suburbs are themselves small cities, relatively small cities that could be cities in their own right in other places. So I think you could probably get a lot from their experience.
Millennials have been defined in many different ways. For the purposes of this study, can you let us know how you defined millennials?
They are between the ages of 18 to 34.
How would you recommend transit agencies and the government use this data, and how can we change the negative perceptions the millennials have about public transportation?
Well, I think technology is a big friend of ours right now because really it is a game changer when it comes to closing the perceived barriers that people have noted in this survey, and also dealing with some of the perceived benefits of other modes, quite frankly. So the use of these apps, I think, is very important for us. The outfitting of our physical plant with Wi-Fi and 3G and 4G service will go a long way, given the respondent preferences here. And also what we do with air technology will be a large part of this too. Giving folks a seamless way of paying that requires less thought, and therefore it's just like hopping in your car almost, because with your phone you can see the bus is going to come in 5 minutes and you already have your app that allows you to pay your fare, so you just use your phone and you get right on. It requires very little thought, and that starts to bridge the gap between the perceived spontaneity that one will get from the use of a car, and we can be just as spontaneous as public transportation users with this new technology. So technology is our friend, and we can go a long way with that.
Could developers and planners both, when creating a new or an existing development, assist with transportation demand management? In other words, would businesses be able to cater to businesses and the public about transit choice for the typical commute?
Well, I think, making sure that mobility options are strengthened is always a good thing. Also, supporting the commuter benefit, which will help people commute more affordably, which is important. That's a very important political issue. Also encouraging folks to utilize and make sure that they support local bike share programs is also useful, because what that does, it closes the last mile between the station and where folks might be working. And it's also a great way to help manage some of the demand we have in central city areas, where if there's a developed enough bike share program that has the capacity, it could be useful in terms of helping those commutes.
Did you consider studying populations in urban areas with less robust transit systems, such as Atlanta, San Jose, or Dallas?
We primarily focused on a handful of areas. I think we would love to do a wider sample, actually. It would be a great next step. However, given our constraints, we had to focus on a handful of cities that we thought were representative of the types of places that people tend to be attracted to, not just in terms of urban location, but also suburban location.
You mentioned areas that are attractive to millennials. How do you define attractive to millennials, and how did you select the zip codes?
We did a variety of things. We looked at newspaper articles in all the local cities to find out what neighborhoods are getting the most buzz. We looked at data from the census. We did a variety of things to figure out, A, is there some shift happening where people are moving into an area? B, is there some sort of local buzz happening with these communities? And then we tried to map out where those were and get a sense of, okay, what zip codes are these? And oftentimes we were lucky enough to have a good sample of folks from each metropolitan area that happened to have their residences in one of those zip codes. As I said, it was widely distributed across the metropolitan areas in our survey, but we did get a nice sample from those key zip codes, and like I said, about a third of them were in those zip codes.
Did you see any differences in behavior or preferences by race or ethnicity and or income?
We did not actually delve into the subtabs there to figure out there's a difference in people's habits based on race or income. So we did not stratify the data to that degree.
Did trip time impact a millennial's interest in using transit? You know, for example, would a longer transit trip be a reason to change the method of travel to car, perhaps?
Well, convenience is a key factor that was noted here. We did not actually ask them about trip length and trip time. We did notice that in the survey, people spent a fair amount of time both driving and actually taking public transportation. However, I can tell you from other research that the propensity to take public transportation is not simply a factor of time, because you can do things while you're actually on public transportation. You can work, as I mentioned. So people might be slightly less sensitive to time as long as they have that 4G, 3G connection, that Wi-Fi that allows them to do other things as they're traveling. Based on other research, I can tell you that there's a little bit more leeway there for transit time. We actually have a great researcher on staff that I can give you his contact to go in deeper data there for you.
Did you see differences in behavior with different service headways or environmental factors? And if so, do they correspond closely to the study or to the general guidelines outlined in the Transit Capacity and Quality of Service Manual?
We actually didn't differentiate based on service frequency necessarily to figure out if there's a difference in behaviors. Our primary way of perhaps looking at that would be just the urban versus suburban connection there, but we did not go into that level of detail.
A little bit on preference of taking rail underground versus a BRT or light rail on the surface, shorter trips, 2 or 3 stops in the Millennium area where you're affiliated with the community. Any preferences pursued?
Let's see, I actually have something on there. Let me give you the slide here. I think if you look at preferences, and we actually went through modal preferences at the beginning of the presentation, there is a difference in terms of preferences, but I think what you note is there's a big difference between preference versus driving, and the gap between the various modes of public transportation happens to be a little bit tighter.
Looking at the effort to make to go up or down in a subway versus catching a good express bus, a BRT, or light rail in a dedicated right-of-way on the surface, you're kind of traveling 2 or 3 stops within a community.
Actually, what we did here, we grouped all rail together, so it's subway, light rail, streetcar, and trolley. So slightly more preferred than bus.
Okay.
Bus is about rated, same as bicycle use, but subway, light rail, and streetcar are all grouped together. So I couldn't tell you the impact of having to go up and down stairs necessarily.
Millennials are strapped financially. If money was not a major issue, would life choices be different? For example, where to live and the mode of transportation used?
Well, one thing we've noted in the survey here is that, yes, being pragmatic with their money is an important issue for them. However, I think these other factors are also important for them. And as I said, these other factors are actually part of our competitive advantage as an industry. The more we can use technology to make our systems more convenient, the more that we highlight the fact you can get exercise and have a healthy lifestyle from not just using public transportation, but also talk about how public transportation creates communities that are more healthy because they promote walking to your destination will all be upside for us. Also, this sense of community that I mentioned before, I think these are all major parts of neighborhood preference, and the money side is just part of it. I think there are fundamental differences underway with this generation that makes them, yes, money is a factor, but it's not the only factor. They're quite pragmatic. And really this technology factor is huge here. The ability to socialize as they travel, the ability to work as they travel, means they actually have a better lifestyle with public transportation, particularly as we fully leverage our technological advantage.
Someone noted that you classified the income levels, but when you were classifying millennials, did you note whether under Title VI they would be classified as earning less than the poverty threshold, and if so, did their perceptions differ?
We did not go below the poverty level in looking at income levels. I might have some data in the sub-tab, so if someone's interested in that in particular, I can do a deeper dive. But the primary subgroups we have for income are less than 50,000. I can see if we have enough numbers to do a deeper dive with that question, that Title VI question.
Did you see more transit support in areas that have universal transit pass programs or eco-pass programs?
We did not ask about the ability to use other types of passes, but one thing we did note in the survey is kind of a want to make things a little easier and more tied to a customer-friendly interface. So the more you kind of move along the gradient of making it easier and more intuitive, the happier they are as customers.
When you say suburb, what is the size that you're describing? So taking San Francisco, for example, is a suburb considered Oakland or San Jose, or somewhere more like the Marina District within the city? And the question notes that there are very different service levels in the suburbs compared to areas within the metropolitan area.
I think when we looked at the mapping of the respondents, we found that people are dispersed widely around the metropolitan area. So yes, we have people in the central city core zone areas. We also have them in smaller towns further out, like say in Contra Costa County might be a good example for that person to ask that question. You know, they could be living out in Pittsburgh out there or Antioch. So like literally they were widely dispersed across the metropolitan area. And when I say suburbs, I mean even the smaller suburbs that are less connected to the central city.
And a follow-up to that question, how can suburban agencies utilize this information to improve their marketing efforts?
Well, I think really pushing the use of apps, the use of real-time data, making changes to fare technology to make it more seamless and more user-friendly, perhaps using something with a smartphone. That all can be a major upside for connecting to this demographic. It doesn't always have to be huge changes in service. It can be fully leveraging the technology question.
Are you aware of any similar previous studies on other generations to see if these trends that are associated with millennials are also associated with these other generations?
I do have some knowledge of some other surveys that were done. I think Urban Land Institute had one. Well, actually, as part of their trends in real estate, they noted some of the changes that were happening and some of the splits in usage compared to other generations. I did note when I looked at that the numbers were a little higher than you would find in some of the other surveys I've read. So things might be happening there. There's also some other sources I can mention. If you want to email me, I can give you some additional sources.
Did you see any differences in trends between college students and full-time employees?
Well, I think the difference would be primarily that there's differences in behaviors when folks don't have roommates. They are, according to this survey, slightly less connected to living in certain types of neighborhoods, but they're still very connected to the key elements: walkability, public transportation availability, that sort of thing. So the trends continue after college, and they continue so far through the life cycle.
In your survey cities, did the results show whether the millennials have any type of impact on public policy related to transportation options being provided?
Whether or not they had any relation to the public transportation options being provided?
Yes. I think the question is asking whether the millennials are influencing the transportation policies that are in place, and whether they're, making a difference by being, engaged politically and campaigning for the particular transportation options that they would choose and that they would value.
This survey didn't cover that, but there's anecdotal evidence around the country that something's happening now, that there's further engagement from this group, that they are having an impact on service. And I think as the size of the generation grows, because it's not fully at its full build-out size, I think you're going to notice additional changes as well.
You mentioned expanding the sample size and locations. What size and locations would yield more insight and or more detailed results?
I'm really interested in the changes that have happened in areas that have been providing additional service, such as BRT and new light rail extensions. I would like to focus in on those communities and those zip codes if I could, to figure out what's been happening there, and that's an area of future research, actually. I think there's a good story to learn and to communicate from that, so we would like to do that in the future.
Were the hotspot zip codes only in the few cities studied, or were they countrywide?
Like I said before, this survey only focused on a handful of cities, but I can tell you that these hotspot neighborhoods exist across the country. They exist in towns of various sizes. The key factors that really drive people to want to live in these areas would be interesting nightlife and art scene, walkability, public transportation availability. All will be factors that will help these zip codes become more attractive, and also to help spur additional economic development for those communities. So, even though this survey focused on a small number of cities, the trends can in fact be applied across the country.
Do you have any recommendations for marketing to people who aren't necessarily within this kind of target population? So you've spoken a bit about the importance of marketing different options and different apps and so on to the millennials, but can any of this be applied to other population groups as well?
Oh, I'm sure, and I was on a panel at a conference, and a gentleman shared a really interesting observation. He noted that there was a senior citizens home across the street from where a lot of millennials tend to live, and they would always go downstairs to the bus stop when they saw the millennials group there, because they knew they had the smartphones, and they knew when the bus was going to come. So really, a lot of people are interested in engaging in this technology. A lot of folks would make the use of this technology, and it could apply across generations.
And as a follow-up to that, the questioner also wants to know, will this be presented to marketing groups, other APSA committees, and so on?
Indeed. We presented this actually at the APTA Rail Conference. Our chair presented it to the group. We will continue to make this available and actually continue to talk about it. It was presented at the APTA CEOs Conference, which I think happened just last week in New Orleans. So this is the issue that our industry cares about. We know they do, so we will continue to talk about this and hopefully learn additional insights from future research and share those as well.